You should hear what keeps him up at night.
This is what keeps me up at night. I don't understand how my fellow Americans, I don't even understand how this election is close. And yes, I'm voting for you, but I would also vote for that wall over there.
Well, he's half right. We do need a wall. You know, to keep out gang members, fentanyl dealers, human traffickers, and Anna Navarro. What's funny, though, is that Stern actually thought that was a compliment. Stern has become such a wussified sycophant, he doesn't realize that telling Kamala that he'd vote for a wall is telling her that he knows she's as dumb as one.
What happens when the very definition of rebellion becomes the establishment it once despised? What happens when the uncensored icon, the self-proclaimed king of all media, finds himself utterly out-rebelled on his own turf, leaving him with no comeback, no fire, just a thunderous, awkward silence? This wasn't just another media spat, it was a cultural reckoning, a live television collision that transcended the usual celebrity feud, burning itself into the pop culture consciousness like a meteor strike. Loud, fiery, and impossible to ignore, it exposed the stunning evolution of Howard Stern, forcing millions to confront the uncomfortable truth of a rebel's surrender, while simultaneously cementing the rise of a new, equally provocative voice in Greg Gutfeld. One walked away looking like he still belonged in the stratosphere, the other a curious ghost of his former formidable self.
But that's how Stern can call snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant exhausting. Exhausting. Like he finished the overnight shift in a coal mine, or hearing Kat talk about her pets.
Fair.
But I get it, life is tough, especially when you've been cut off from the world for 2 years in a $20 million beach house. I mean, you have no idea how tiring it is walking all the way from the wine cellar to the tennis court and back. But it is incredibly brave to take this stance after you've made $300, $400 million not being woke, right? Loving Donald Trump, exploiting the mentally ill, wearing blackface. Look at the crop of woke comics, whether it's Stern or Jimmy Kimmel, his BFF, Sarah Silverman, Joy Behar, Michael Ian Black. What do they all have in common? They wore blackface. And then they went woke. It's not a chicken or egg thing there. You know what order it came. So I call this BFR. It's blackface reparations. There's nothing in Stern's previous career that could withstand this modern witch hunt that he now embraces. So this is a form of restitution. Maybe he says, you know, if I'm woke too, the crocodile will eat me last, but they always do eat. But I get it. He flipped from populist to elitist because now he's with elitists.
For decades, Howard Stern was an unshakable force, a true phenomenon who meticulously carved out an empire from pure, unadulterated shock, defiance, and a relentless tearing down of every sacred cow in sight. His name wasn't just synonymous with radio, it was synonymous with disruption, defiance, and controversy. He was the brash, unfiltered conscience of a generation fed up with polite society, daring to do and say the things no one else would. You either loved him or hated him, but one thing was undeniably true. You simply couldn't ignore him. He built a career on fearlessly mocking phoniness, shredding celebrities, and terrifying censors, embracing the role of the ultimate outsider. Yet somewhere along the way, this brash voice began a slow, almost imperceptible, yet ultimately jarring transformation. The one who once famously spat on the red carpet now seemed to be rolling it out for himself. The most startling moment of this shift perhaps came when Stern, interviewing a prominent political figure, expressed his willingness to vote for that wall over there, seemingly convinced it was a compliment. The old Stern, the one who built his reputation on tearing down political establishments, would have recognized the subtle, stinging insult in that phrase. The new Stern, however, appeared to accept it as genuine praise, revealing a profound and unsettling disconnect from the very essence of his rebellious past.
I will say this, Dagan. I thank God for Howard Stern because he does make me feel normal by comparison. Because I'm like the Fox recluse. I don't do anything. I don't go anywhere. But he makes me look like, you know, Pete Davidson on a...
Yeah, he's a germaphobe. Like his wife rescues cats. That's her job, apparently, her thing. But you can get toxoplasmosis.
That's
and
true.
Cryptosporidiosis.
AIDS.
And
no, you can't.
No,
but
you can't get.
No, you can't.
But you can get.
I mean, what are the chances I get that again?
Like like a lot of diarrhea.
On his radio show, Howard Stern defended wokeism, saying it's a compliment when someone calls him woke. Listen.
If woke means I can't get behind Trump, which is what I think it means, or that I support people who want to be transgender, or I'm for the vaccine, well, dude, call.
But Stern being holed up in his house that long, it explains a lot of things, like how you forget how other people live, especially in hard times like a pandemic. For the longest time, 2 years in fact, the same time Stern's been AWOL, I wondered where he went. Not physically, but mentally. I bet you did too. Remember his screeds about COVID? They were epic and angry, and not to mention wrong.
When are we going to stop putting up with the idiots in this country and just say, it's mandatory to get vaccinated? Fuck them, fuck their freedom. I want my freedom.
This alarming transformation was perhaps exacerbated, or at least certainly highlighted, by his curious 2-year self-imposed isolation. For the longest time, the man who once prided himself on being connected to the pulse of everyday America disappeared into a $20 million beach house, cut off from the very world he once captivated. His public musings often reflected this privileged bubble, such as when he described snacking with celebs at a fancy restaurant as exhausting. Exhausting? One could only imagine the reaction from those who actually worked overnight shifts in coal mines or grappled with the relentless grind of true hardship. He'd lament the sheer fatigue of walking from his wine cellar to the tennis court and back, utterly tone deaf to the struggles of his former audience. The germaphobe persona, once a quirky, relatable trait, evolved into a symbol of his complete detachment. This wasn't just a rich man living a life of luxury. It was a figure who seemed to have entirely forgotten how other people live, especially in the hardest of times. The raw, unfiltered voice that once connected with the common person had become a muffled echo from behind the walls of an elite, insulated mansion. And then there was the radical ideological pivot. The same Howard Stern who once openly embraced Donald Trump, who was accused of exploiting the mentally ill for entertainment and who famously wore blackface, now proudly champions wokeism, insisting that being called woke is a compliment. This astonishing shift has led to cynical theories, often dubbed blackface reparations, suggesting it's a form of calculated restitution, a strategic embrace of modern progressive ideology to survive the relentless scrutiny of today's witch hunt culture. The narrative is that by aligning himself with the very forces that might otherwise cancel him, he hopes the crocodile will eat him last. The rebel who once defined himself by challenging the system has seemingly become an uncritical defender of its most extreme elements. He flipped from populist icon to elitist advocate, seemingly abandoning his fearless, uncensored identity for the perceived safety and mainstream acceptance offered by Hollywood and corporate approval. This wasn't merely a change of heart, it was a seismic shift that left many of his longtime fans bewildered, watching their icon slowly morph into the very conformist he once so vehemently despised.
Even when I watch them on Saturday Night Live with the where they have Maya Rudolph playing you, I hate it. I don't want you being made fun of.
Oh my God.
There's too much at stake. I believe the entire future of this country right now, I mean, as America, land of the free, home of the brave, I think it's literally on the line.
So a guy who's supposed to be funny for a living now claims her candidacy is too important to joke about. This is a guy who once joked right after the Columbine massacre that the killers should have raped the students before killing them. Not that I like that Stern, but this pendulum swing from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting your balls in a Tic Tac container. You gotta wonder what's going on here. It's striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate. Happy Friday, America. Oh man, tonight is a special night. It's Feminine Friday, where all the panelists are women. Tonight we have Kennedy. Yeah! David McDowell. Pat Tim. And Janine Garofalo.
Yes.
All right.
Truth
A long
about
way
cats
for
and
a mean
dogs.
joke. Okay, I hope you had a good week. I did, and no thanks to Howard Stern. True, the New York Post reported that Stern hit a chic restaurant in NYC with a crew of A-listers, including Jimmy Kimmel, Jennifer Aniston, Jon Hamm, Justin Theroux, Jason Bateman. I was not invited. I guess
It was into this vulnerable crack in Stern's meticulously manicured armor that Greg Gutfeld saw his opening. Gutfeld, for all his critics, has masterfully cultivated his own unique brand of televised confrontation. He's part political commentator, part late-night jester, and part cultural demolition expert. His method isn't just to argue. He dissects, he ridicules, he exposes with a precision that cuts far deeper than mere shouting. With his nightly show blending sarcasm, satire, and stinging commentary, Gutfeld has built his empire by targeting sacred cows and igniting fires where others fear to tread. So when Stern's newfound wokeness popped up in one of Gutfeld's segments, what began as a casual mention quickly morphed into a focused, almost surgical takedown. Gutfeld didn't just question Stern's transformation, he dismantled it piece by piece, challenging the entire trajectory of Stern's evolution, mercilessly mocking the man who once thrived on chaos for now preaching conformity from his gilded penthouse studio. He framed Stern not as a legend who had evolved, but as a cautionary tale, a fearless iconoclast who had become exactly what he used to rage against, a sellout. And the punch landed with a deafening, resounding silence. Gutfeld didn't need to raise his voice or froth at the mouth. Instead, he sliced with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel, meticulously comparing the wild-haired, reckless truth bomber of old, who terrified censors and mocked elites, with the new, meticulously groomed Stern, now cozily rubbing shoulders with the very celebrities he once shredded. It was a quiet gutting, a brutal unraveling of a legacy carefully built on rebellion, but now teetering precariously on the precipice of respectability. The sheer absurdity practically wrote itself. Here was the man who built an empire mocking phoniness, now wearing the very mask he used to tear off others. Gutfeld didn't even have to exaggerate. All he had to do was describe the transformation. The symbolism was devastating. The shock jock who once spat on the red carpet had now rolled it out for himself. What made it hit even harder was the context. Gutfeld's show thrives on irreverence, on turning sacred cows into burgers. When he aimed at Stern, it wasn't just another celebrity feud, it was a generational indictment. One voice accusing another of losing its soul, and Stern for once had no comeback, no fireworks, no devastating takedown of his own, just a thunderous, awkward silence that spoke volumes.
Stern got even more pathetic, wondering how she doesn't nap.
When you said you don't nap, I get it, because like what you've taken on is extraordinarily difficult. And I mean, do you feel the pressure of the moment in the sense that, like when I met you out in the hall, I said, I'm really nervous because I want this to go well for you. I want it to go well for the country.
Hold on. I need a minute.
This definition of woke, it's if you call someone a know-it-all, you're not complimenting them on the breadth of their knowledge. Yeah. You're saying you don't know as much as you think you know. So yeah, woke doesn't have anything to do with vaccines. What it really means is sort of a slavish devotion to left-wing ideology and then repeating it so you can get social credit.
Right.
That's really what it means.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that you're smarter than anybody. And he had said in another part of this set, because I believe in the science. Well, if you believed in the science, you wouldn't be hiding out like Howard Hughes in your mansion. So
this silence, the absolute lack of a lightning-fast retort, wasn't just a missed opportunity for Stern. It felt like a quiet confirmation of Gutfeld's critique. The man who once thrived on confrontation, who built an entire career out of eviscerating critics, suddenly disappeared. It gave the impression, fair or not, that Stern had nothing left in the tank, that he'd been caught off guard, and perhaps, deep down, even agreed with the scathing criticism. Viewers who once admired his fire were left wondering where that edge had gone. It wasn't just that he didn't respond, it felt like he couldn't. Gutfeld threw a perfectly aimed punch, and Stern didn't even flinch. Not in defiance, but in what appeared to be stunned confusion. In an industry built on rapid reaction and narrative control, Stern's failure to engage wasn't just a tactical error, it resonated like a public admission. Meanwhile, Gutfeld continued, almost smugly, like a man who knew he had thrown a punch that had not only landed, but had knocked the wind out of his opponent. Thousands of comments, retweets, and YouTube reactions did more to validate his critique than any follow-up monologue ever could. This was the same guy who, in the wake of a tragic school event, had made a darkly offensive joke about the victims, yet now claimed a political candidate was too important to joke about. This pendulum swing, from saying the most tasteless thing in the universe to putting his balls in a Tic Tac container, was stark, unsettling, and undeniable.
I always hate that argument, like, what happened to the old Stern, or what people have changed. That's not what this is about. It's a weird disconnect.
Well, he hasn't changed.
No.
People have been calling him insane for 40 years.
Yeah,
that just used to be, this guy's nuts. And now they're like, oh, well, we're worried about Howard. He needs help.
Mm-hmm.
But I'll tell you, though, I'm a little sympathetic because what you said is correct, but I'm also a germaphobe.
Yeah.
And, you know, I just have a smaller apartment.
Yes.
So it's like
Striking that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever now turns into a breathless over a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate. But maybe that's the explanation. This is Stern's self-imposed penance for subjugating women to demoralizing stunts, capitalizing on desperate females thirsting for attention, even if it's from an oily paddle striking their bare asses.
This direct, undeniable exchange felt like a scathing commentary on the media industry at large, a mirror reflecting its slow decay. Gutfeld's rise wasn't accidental. It was built on the very traits Stern once embodied, but now appeared to have buried: unfiltered humor, relentless defiance, and zero regard for polished narratives. While legacy media stumbles under the weight of self-censorship and corporate sensitivity, Gutfeld has filled the vacuum with bold, brash commentary that resonates deeply. He taps into the hunger for authenticity that Stern once fed. But where Stern now opts for soft interviews and social acceptance, Gutfeld charges forward, reckless and raw. In the crumbling media landscape, it's not just a battle of personalities, it's a changing of the guard. It's not about politics in the traditional sense, it's about authenticity, or at least the perception of it. And in that pivotal moment on live television, Gutfeld emerged as the more authentic voice, the man willing to say the unsayable, even if it meant going after a legend. Stern, by contrast, looked like he was still clinging to a reputation that no longer matched his reality. A king without a crown, lost in a kingdom he no longer recognized. It is strikingly ironic that the king of the most misogynistic humor ever conceived now turns into a breathless advocate for a progressive, hopelessly shallow candidate. Perhaps this is Stern's self-imposed penance for a career spent subjugating women to demoralizing stunts, capitalizing on desperate females thirsting for attention, even if it was from a paddle striking their bare asses. Whether or not that's a fair assessment of his motivations, in media, perception is reality, and the perception has firmly stuck. The question now looms large. Does Howard Stern reclaim his edge and prove the critics wrong, somehow reigniting the rebellious fire that once defined him? Or does he continue down the polished professional path that makes him more palatable, but undeniably less powerful? And what of Greg Gutfeld, now clearly unafraid to punch up? Does he solidify his position as the new face of unfiltered commentary in a world desperate for it? One thing is for certain, the torch has been passed. Or maybe more accurately, it was snatched. The showdown between Greg Gutfeld and Howard Stern wasn't just a fleeting media moment. It was a profound cultural shift, a generational handoff, and a public reckoning for a man who once was the reckoning. And whether you love or hate either of them, the impact was undeniable. You felt it. You knew something fundamental had changed, profoundly and irrevocably, when the king was called out, and for once, the court jester had the last echoing word.